Hello. This presentation is titled Photographic Synchronicities Related to Carl Jung's Psychology and Alchemy. And it was a presentation that I gave at the Alchemy conference, Alchemy Exploring Metaphorical Transformations and Arts-Based Research, which took place at Oxford University and was organized by London Arts-Based Research in November of 2025. So alchemy has always been a special theme in my life. The focus of my PhD thesis is the study of synchronicity, and my very first synchronicity involved the novel The Alchemist, which was written by Paulo Coelho. One day I was browsing at a book sale and became captivated by the mysterious and symbolic cover art on this book. In the next instant, I saw that my new friend on social media had listed the same image as her favorite novel. I was quite shocked by this spontaneous coincidence and understood that there was some spiritual message for me in this experience. From then on, my experience of synchronicities grew over the years and eventually developed into an arts-based research method. This was the first instance of this photographic method. One day, I came across this bright, fresh mural in my city and took a photo, shown here on the left. About half an hour later, back at my house, a storm was brewing, and this was the view from my window on the right. Once again, I was stunned by the uncanny visual resemblance between the two images. The same pink and purple colors, the same angle of line in the clouds, and the phrase, as above, so below, came to mind, the famous Hermetic and alchemical dictum. Notice also that the mural has similarities to the Alchemist book cover, the pink and purple and the triangle. So in both cases of my first synchronicity and my first instance of the arts-based research method for recording and studying synchronicity, which would develop from this experience, the alchemical theme was involved. To date, I've collected hundreds of such photographic stories of synchronicities through double images, and I realized that I'm working with a key alchemical concept of resemblance, the repetition of an image. The philosopher Michael Foucault listed four kinds of resemblance. Convenientia, resemblances found adjacent or close in space. Emulatio, resemblances separated by a distance. Analogy, resemblances that are more like linguistic or image metaphors, and sympathy was defined as the mysterious force that draws the separate events, objects, or locations together. What I would add here also is that when we say resemblances are close or far apart away in distance, this can also mean temporal distance as well as spatial. Carl Jung's famous concept of synchronicity is, of course, also relevant to this because synchronicity is a meaningful resemblance between a psychic image and a physical event, which usually takes place within a short distance of time and not just space. Jung also was fascinated by alchemy and conducted a thorough study of the tradition in his book, Psychology and Alchemy, in which he analyzed the activity of the unconscious within alchemical practices. In this book, Jung also included 270 illustrations taken from historical manuscripts of alchemists. So because my arts-based research method always implicates some form of existing artwork, along with an image of a personal event in my life, reading Jung's book produced many instances of synchronicity for me relating to these artworks. Here is the first example. I was traveling at the time, and this picture on the left, you see me sitting on the bed in the motel room. There was a very funny and awkward placement of the lamp right behind me on the headboard of the bed, so that you see it touching and leaning my head slightly to the right. Later that evening, I came across this artwork of the Anima Mundi in Jung's book, shown in the center. Right away, I noticed the same lean in her head. And just to reinforce that, this artwork on the right also popped up on social media shortly after. Again, a lean in the head, but also the color pink, resonating with my own pink shirt. Looking further, we also see the 3 Adidas stripes on my sleeve, curving in a similar manner, to the three outer rings in the middle artwork. So there's a collection of resonant motifs like pink color, stripes, lean in the head, and of course the short time stretch of all this happening in one evening. And all of these resemblances produce a numinous feeling that often identifies archetypal experiences. It is the archetype, in this case anima mundi, that is presenting itself through a kind of vibratory repetition of images. Now, anima mundi in alchemy stood for the soul of the world, a kind of personified collective being of the earth. When archetypal experiences take place, they produce a definite feeling of some higher form of spiritual intelligence or being communicating with you, something like the anima mundi. In the same hotel room, I was also watching the comedy How Do You Know on TV. This scene came on with the drunk Paul Rudd singing romantically to the lamp. At that exact instant, I had Jung's book open to the page with this illustration of the Ouroboros, the alchemical dragon or serpent that is biting its own tail. As you can see, there's a kind of circular similarity in their poses. So a very precise alignment here of both time and space for the two images. And the Ouroboros in alchemy represents cycles, such as life and death. In this next example, my boyfriend shown here on the left sent me a photo of himself on the roof of a high-rise building where he was working at the time. The next morning, I came across this artwork on the right from Jung's book. It depicts the alchemical Mercurius, the principal deity of the Hermetic and the alchemical traditions. Mercurius was tied to the prima materia, a chemical element of mercury, and Hermes Trismegistus, the enigmatic figure who wrote the Hermetica texts, which the alchemists followed. So in this photo, you see my boyfriend George is unconsciously mirroring his pose, with his forearms becoming the caduceus staffs, with the two intertwining snakes, which is the principal symbol of Mercurius. George is also a Gemini, which makes Mercury his ruling planet. So there was a kind of unconscious channeling of Mercurius on George's part, and he had never seen the photo or the illustration of Mercurius himself. I only showed it to him after I noticed the resemblance. Because George was working on the 78th floor of the building that day, he sent me this other photo on the right, a beautiful view of our city of Toronto. In the right portion of the sky, you may slightly see a subtle reflection of a ladder because he took the photo through a window. I soon found resembling elements in another artwork that Jung included in his book, Jacob's Ladder, which is a painting by the Romantic poet William Blake. Its colored version is shown here on the left, and we have the presence of the ladder, or staircase to heaven, and the same set of colors, blue, gray, and a bit of a golden streak on the horizon of Toronto that you see here. The symbolism is once again, as above, so below, the ladder linking the earth to the sky. On the left is a mural that I saw in Phoenix, Arizona, because I was traveling through that state at the time. And later that same evening, this artwork on the right from Jung's book. The connecting element here is Jung's description line, which states, the combination of all colors symbolizing wholeness. Similarly, the mural peacock is multicolored, rather than just the traditional blue and green. On the left is an illustration of the symbol of the world clock that was included in Jung's Alchemy book, but also became the cover of another one of his books, Atom and Archetype. And this was a collaboration that he worked on with one of the founding quantum physicists, Wolfgang Pauli. They truly were the first to begin gathering resemblances between the psyche and physics. And I find their work very significant to my own because I focus on integrating modern science with archetypal psychology. On the right was this image from the floor of the Dallas airport, in which I had a layover. You see the same set of colors again, blue, yellow, red, and black, the birds, and the clock itself. Pauli had a significant dream of this symbol, which he interpreted as the interpenetration of time, space, and psyche. Now, I also collect various symbolic objects that I happen to find randomly on the street. Here's an awesome little dragon statuette I found on a bus seat once. Now, the artwork on the right is not in Jung's book, but it is a more modern tattoo reproduction of a 15th century alchemical artwork by Sir George Ripley. I found there to be resemblances like the sphere on which the dragon stands. Also, my pink nails hold the sphere, and you see something like red nails coming out of the sphere in the artwork itself. Additionally, the sphere of the statuette has three bubbles in a downward triangle, while the artwork has three dots in an upward triangle at the top. Once again, the two opposing triangles signify as above, so below. Here are a few more totem objects I found which correlated to illustrations in Jung's book. The lotus flower, with the illustration showing the lotus growing out of a tortoise, and subsequently the tortoise object itself. And these were found at the front door and the back door of my building, where I often find various interesting symbolic objects. Again, a kind of alchemical balance here with the back and the front doors, maybe signifying something as within, so without, perhaps. Another example is when I was driving one day and I noticed a long wavy streak in the clouds, and soon after the animal head in the cloud, and I took a photo. With research, I found a resonant alchemical wood carving on the right from 1652. Notice the two dragons intertwined with each other, with the moon and the sun symbols there as well, overall symbolizing the unification of the opposites, which was the central theme for both Alchemy and Jung's work on individuation. My photo contains the moon dragon's head and the sun dragon's tail, only half of what is in the artwork, but still it unites the opposites. In this example, the alchemical illustration of bear in Jung's book reminded me of seeing a real bear on the side of the road in Alberta, in Canada, several years before. I went back through my photos, and sure enough, the bear that I photographed was in a similar standing position facing to the left. Not all of these experiences are technically synchronicities. Some are more like resemblances found after more intentional research, and others are like memories. Memory and synchronicity are actually related phenomena. Jung described archetypes as collective memories stored in the collective unconscious, thus as both memories and potentials for future manifestation as archetypes. They have this dual temporal nature that gives them their acausal power and breaks through the constraints of linear time. Similarly, this rose image in Jung's book reminded me of this wonderfully numinous encounter. My grandma's name was Rose, and exactly a year after her passing, my mom's garden, out of nowhere, sprouted this one beautiful rose. My mom said she planted the rose seeds years ago, but they never ended up growing. So this was a real surprise and felt like a potent message from my grandmother's spirit. And of course, there was a precise temporal alignment of the exact date after my grandmother's passing. My father was another family member who passed away recently, very suddenly, while he was on vacation in Portugal. As a result, I had to travel there for his funeral. While there one day, while walking through downtown Lisbon, I noticed this spray-painted image on the left, and it felt alchemical. Sure enough, a few days later, I would learn from Jung's book that this image was the green lion devouring the sun, shown in the middle. One of its interpretations is the death of the ego and the rebirth of the new self. Now, besides being a Leo sun, astrologically, my father's name was also Alisher, which signifies sublime lion in ancient Persian. So once again, this was a sign of my father's physical death and rebirth in the spirit realm. That same evening, as I noticed the graffiti in Lisbon, my mom also spotted this interesting cloud from our hotel balcony, shown on the right. Later, I would also notice a spontaneous alignment of the shape between the two images in my phone photo gallery. The lion in the middle and the cloud. So again, many resemblances and alignments and a spiritual message that brought reassurance in a time of grief. Likewise, here is an eagle that was in the cobblestone design on the ground in front of our hotel in Portugal. Again, Jung writes the phrase, spirit ascending from prima materia in his illustration on the left. And the two images quite obviously resemble each other. Another memory. This illustration of the swan from Jung's book on the left reminded me of this photo of a real swan I took years ago while kayaking Lake Ontario. I always thought that this photo came out special because the bobbing of the kayak produced a kind of doubling effect in the photograph. So you see the swan in an ethereal way as a kind of subtle body surrounding the physical body. This effect also reminds us of one of the alchemical transformations, which is sublimation. The alchemical transformations were a series of chemical steps that compose the work or the magnum opus of the alchemists. Each step or transformation was essentially a chemical change of state, but the physical processes were also accompanied by psychological transformations within the alchemist's psyche. Working with this idea of alchemical transformations, I realized that my magnum opus too involves certain transformations. For one, I used the technique of image doubling that I showed you here to study not only synchronistic resemblances in art, but various other kinds of psychological experiences involving repeating images. For example, in precognition, a psychic image transforms into a physical event, whereas the photographic method I showed you is more like Paul Kammerer's term, seriality, where a physical image turns into another physical image. Likewise, in art-space transformations, there is an existing artwork transforming into a personal photograph, or vice versa, or a psychic image might be reproduced in a drawing or something like that. So there are many kinds of transformations that can take place and can be studied. One final example of an arts-based research transformation involving the archetype of the Egyptian god Thoth, who is the second counterpart to Mercurius in the syncretic figure of Hermes Trismegistus. I created this image on the left using an AI app of a vision of Thoth I once had, in which he was doing a kind of gliding dance. The same evening, my friend's kids and I were at a roller skating party. I was skating behind Toby and called his name. And as he turned to look behind his shoulder, I snapped the perfect photo of him. This wasn't a completely spontaneous synchronicity, more like an act of co-creation with the archetype, even though Toby knew nothing about the picture that I had made. But even still, some elements repeated spontaneously. For example, the dark, shadowy atmosphere in both images, the patch of violet light you see on Toby's right hip, which is mirrored by the same violet patch on Thoth's skirt in the same place. And this was created autonomously by AI. So thank you so much for listening and watching my presentation. You can find my art-space research and the full essay on alchemy on my website, juliayusupova.com. In this paper, I interpret more alchemical concepts like ether, the alchemical gold, quintessence, and relate them all theoretically to the study of precognition and synchronicity. Specifically, I explain how these psychological modalities work to spatialize stretches of linear time and thus create and allow us to discern higher dimensions of space and consciousness. And the essay is titled 5D Consciousness and the Philosopher's Stone. Thank you so much.